Studies show it can take some kids around 6 weeks to get back into the school routine. So what can you do to help? Joining us to discuss how to turn brain drain into brain gain is neuroscientist Sarah Baldeo. Good morning. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yes, brain drain. We've been talking about this over the years. It's a real thing. Tell us about that.
Well, we know children normally have 8 to 10 weeks of summer break, and that's a significantly long time at any age. After that amount of time, your brain does a little bit of housekeeping and it starts to prune those neural synapses that you're not using. So if kids are not stimulated over summer break, their brain is cleaning house and getting rid of the brain cells that it hasn't used for 2 months.
And they're back in school now, and you think that they're getting back in and they're learning right away, but it might take extra time for them to be able to do that. So you have 3 tips for parents to help reduce that 6-week time period, and one of them is to do a room refresh. How does that help?
Yes. So as you mentioned, it can take up to 6 weeks for kids to get kind of back into their routine and using those neural synapses again. Within reason, great recommendation. I'm a parent myself. I've tried this. Have them reorganize their room. Obviously, you don't want them totally renovating. But what that does is it stimulates 2 really important parts of the brain. Number 1 is the parietal cortex, which is your sense of spatial awareness. And number 2 is your frontal cortex, which we use for logic and decision making. And so when you allow them to, do a room refresh, move things around, it's going to stimulate their brains and significantly cut back on that 6-week time frame that sometimes happens when they go back to school.
Interesting. Also, diet is pretty important as well, Sarah. What are your tips in regards to that?
We all know diet has such a significant impact on us and our mental health. What you can do when they're going back to school, start having them pick out perhaps 1 new snack a week. And when you're thinking about the snacks, try to pick items that contain something called tryptophan. And tryptophan is an essential amino acid. It actually controls a neurotransmitter called serotonin, which is responsible for long-term happiness. But it also controls mood, appetite, and sleep regulation. So a couple of examples of those types of food: peas, quinoa, and turkey are all very, very high in tryptophan.
Okay, good tip there. I have to adjust the snack menu at home then. And I know at this time of year, there's also, what can be a stressful time of year because the kids are going back to new relationships and new classmates, new subjects. How do you recommend people deal with that?
So in my case, my son actually just started high school. So if they're starting school or they're starting a new grade, as you perfectly articulated, there's always a sense of change. What you're going to see happening in children is they have very high stress and very high anxiety, and that translates to high cortisol and adrenaline in their bodies. Now, I'm guilty of this as a mom. Your first kind of inkling is they've been home for 8 to 10 weeks. Let's just put them into activities and get them busy after school. What I recommend is try to schedule an hour of detox time when they come home from school. That could be journaling. That could be just talking to you about their day. And I really recommend for parents, try to resist the urge to throw them into extracurricular activities right as they're starting school, because that's even going to heighten those levels of stress and anxiety that we see if you do it right at the beginning of school starting.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of those extracurricular always do start right at the start of the school year. So it'd be great if the organizers just sort of schedule it a little bit differently so it isn't such an adjustment